Hi, I'm Sallie Knox Hall. Welcome to my studio. Dressed up for y'all today. It's COVID time, so I have been in sweatpants and a t-shirt for about the last month. So I thought maybe I would, be a little more presentable on camera today. Anyway, I'm sitting in this stool that I sit on many hours a week, working here in my studio that's right outside my back door. So I feel very lucky that it's easy. I can just not even brush my teeth, walk right out the door in my slippers and work that way if I'd like to, which I do often. In order to tell you a little bit about the processes of my work, I would like to tell you a little bit about myself, my background, so you kind of understand how it all came to be. I am from Louisiana originally, lived a lot of my life in Texas, but Texas and Louisiana mostly, so the southern roots. We moved to Manitou, my husband and my two children and I, about, it's going on 5 years now. I have been creating for as long as I can remember. Since I was a kid, I drew, I painted, I used to paint on rocks, I used to make jewelry and try to sell it on the side of the road. But anyway, I've always been creative. I was in a program in middle school and high school, like an accelerated art program. I had wonderful teachers, ended up majoring in art, had a painting minor, and then art education is what I graduated with. Taught school for a couple of years, but I ended up kind of abandoning art for about probably close to 10 years. I did not do a whole lot. I ended up in a wholesale retail career and didn't do it for a while. Fast forward to having children, I actually went back to school, went to nursing school, and in the middle of all that, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and my life just kind of came to a stop. And I went through the process of treatment. I was sick for a while. And when I started healing physically, I also started realizing I needed to sort of heal mentally. And I gave myself permission to start painting again because I wasn't doing a whole lot during that time. Couldn't get out of the house too much. And I picked up the brush again, just kind of used materials that I had. I always had a lot of paint supplies and drawing supplies at the house anyway. And I discovered, I remembered how much that it's just in my soul. And I kind of happened, I think I was looking for maybe a little bit of direction, and I kind of stumbled onto a website of a woman that lives in Houston, and her name is Sherry Ray, and she is kind of the protege. I'm going to get a book and show you real quick. Actually, I've got two books over here. A French woman named Michelle Cassou, and they I don't want to say teach, facilitate, I would say, a process that a lot of people call intuitive painting, or Michelle actually calls it 0.0 painting. I don't think I have the 0.0 book. But anyway, it's kind of for me, it was kind of an unteaching of the things that I learned through the years. I sort of needed a little unteaching. I always had voices in my head that said, if you don't do it this way, it's not right. If you, just sort of that inner critic that I guess was always there, telling me that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't, I didn't do it the right way. And so I started going to Houston for a couple of days every year and to workshops that Sherry teaches on intuitive painting. And I would call it a sort of an unlearning. It was a time to get rid of that inner critic and to sort of just paint for the process of painting. And in that, I really learned to be free with what came out of me onto the paper or the canvas or whatever. I just really sort of found this new energy that really allowed me to do what I wanted to do, because I was not trying anymore to follow some sort of I don't know, I don't want to say formula, but what I guess what I thought I was supposed to do to make it look the way I thought it was supposed to look, if that makes any sense. And so I continued painting just for fun, for process, for not to show anybody. And there was a point where I was working, a friend had opened a gift shop, and I was actually working in the back of her shop. I was doing some gift type items on found fence board and some old cedar that I had. During that time, I had a friend who asked me to paint her home, and I had never done anything like that before. And I said, absolutely, I'll paint your home. It was this beautiful old wooden house on the Mandeville, Louisiana lakefront. It was a raised home. It had lots of beautiful woodwork and this stairwell that came down, and a staircase that came down in the front. And she said, absolutely, just do your style, add your flair, do whatever you want. But I just want the front of my house, and I want my, I think she had dachshunds. She wanted her little dogs in front. And so I did, and her home ended up on a tour of homes and ended up in the Times-Picayune in New Orleans. That's a New Orleans newspaper. And the photographer took about 3 different shots of my painting that was in her kitchen. And that sort of just grew into a life of its own. And so that is how my kind of funky family folk art type paintings came to be. So I'll tell you a little bit about how the process of how I do these, I call them non-traditional family paintings. This has kind of evolved over time. I use acrylics. I used to use just whatever acrylics I could get my hands on, but over the years, I've been doing these for, gosh, maybe 10 years, probably 10 years now, at least 8. And I have really come to love golden paints. For any of you artists out there that do acrylics, I do these all in acrylics. The reason I started using acrylics, when I was growing up, I learned how to do acrylics and then oils, and I did oils for a long time, of course in college and a little bit after, but I started doing these paintings when my kids were young, and I worked out of our dining room. And when you work with oils and you've got, 5-year-olds running around, that just does not work. And so if you have to stop on a minute's notice, you can close up your acrylics and be on your way and come back to them. So what I do when I have a client that wants to start the process of their family painting is I ask for them to send me photos of people, homes, pets, anything that needs to resemble the real thing. I don't want any other elements that are going into the painting I don't want to work from a photo other than faces, pets, or maybe a home, or sometimes somebody will have something like, I don't know, a tractor or an old car that's important to them that needs to look like it really does in real life. So I do need a reference for that. But for all the other elements that go into the painting, I like for people to give me a list. Here's an example of a list that somebody sent. This particular one I'm working on is somebody that lives in West Texas, probably I think south of Fort Worth, maybe southwest of Fort Worth. And she sent me some ideas. Cooking, needlepoint, likes to drink wine, son hunts and fishes. They have pecan trees on their property, watermelons, cotton, So that kind of gives me some ideas to work with, but they're not really concrete. They're not photos where you get too locked into the left brain. I prep my canvas with a colored gesso. I used to use white, but I realized that so I sort of always use this blue or turquoise or kind of whatever happens in the jar as I'm mixing it. But I do like to have kind of a medium color background to start on. I use charcoal to sort of sketch out the main elements. I usually do not plan it in advance too much. I like it to just happen a little more freely. So I'll sort of get a thought in my head and of maybe the placement of the home, as in this one, and then I'll just sort of go from there. Obviously there's some left brain work that has to go into, how many windows and sort of this little garage area here. I may have to think about a little bit more, but once that starts to flow and I can get the important elements where they need to be, then I can sort of let it flow a little bit more and not have to think so much. I can get more into my right brain. And so this particular painting, she wanted cows. There's a few things that I know that I'm going to add in the background. The way that I work, I like to really fill up the space. And so if we get to the end of the painting and she says, oh gosh, I forgot, we have a windmill that is out on our property, then there is always room to add. I tell people that never feel like you can't tell me to add something else. I've actually even gone to people's homes and added things like babies, or I've actually taken away things too. Sometimes, somebody might break up with a boyfriend or something and you might need to edit that out. So I have done that too. So it can get pretty interesting with families and dynamics and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, this has been my bread and butter for a very long time. I absolutely still love doing them, and they never get old because they're all different. And I thought my business was going to fall off during this time. About a month ago, we all started staying home and not working. But I think the importance of family has really come to the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And so I've actually gotten a few calls and emails in the last few weeks for new business. So I'm kind of excited about that. But anyway, I am the kind of artist that I get bored if I do too much of the same thing. And so in order to keep the work fresh, I have a whole other way that I work. So we'll shift the camera over here and I'll kind of tell you a little bit about that. Anyway, I was wanting a little bit of direction with getting back into oils. And so I came across a class at Cottonwood Art Center that Tish Lacey Reed teaches about oil, or it's oil and cold wax. And it just looked interesting and it looked like something that I could handle. I'm a little bit lazy when it comes to setting up my area and it can't be too complicated. I would never have a photography studio. I would never be able to. There's just some things I'm not going to do. And so anyway, oil and cold wax seemed like something I could handle. And so anyway, I went to her class and I just had a blast. And it just kind of was like, this is what I want to do. And so, of course, I went out and bought some cold wax, which is cold wax medium. The way that Tish teaches it is you use a half and half. So basically, half cold wax, half oils. I don't have really expensive oils. I'm not there yet. I haven't figured out what brands that I liked, but I have been happy with just kind of the mishmash of whatever I've bought at local stores like Meiningers, I think that's how you say it. I'm kind of new here, but or Michael's or whatever, or online. And so the way that she taught it and the way that I have have enjoyed doing it, I really like what she does, is to, I usually use a birch panel, which I've used before, because sometimes I would say about 25% of my family paintings people want it on a birch panel. And so lots of frog tape in this studio, because I like my edges to be natural. So I use frog tape to cover them up while I'm working, so that the paint doesn't get on the edges. I like this 1.5 inch cradle, I believe they call it, but that one's still wet. So what I do is I use a black gesso first. You can kind of see it. This is one that's in process right now. Okay, so Tish in her class taught us a couple of ways to start these, but I really liked the way that she taught us to lay down a black acrylic gesso on the panel before we started. And then she taught us, or she told us about this wonderful little tool from Catalyst. I don't even know what it's called. But you can kind of lay down some lighter color with this tool. You kind of scrape it. This is kind of getting dry, even though I'm in the middle of it. But that's the beauty of living in Colorado. It can dry fast if you want it to, or you better get on it if you need it to be wet. But it's kind of like when you use the cold wax, when you mix the cold wax with the oil, it sort of gives it this thicker, I'll kind of show you, this sort of thick, kind of like, gosh, like, I don't know, icing, maybe like cake icing, when you mix it 50-50 with oils, kind of texture. I don't know, maybe that's the wrong way to describe it, but it makes it a little more transparent. And so what I love about it is it gives the painting this sort of depth that I don't get easily otherwise, if that makes sense. I love that you can just layer and layer and layer. What I have been doing lately, and like I said before, I really don't try to follow any rules anymore. I just do what feels right to me and what I enjoy doing. With the oil paint, it kind of gives it this maybe cake icing consistency. I don't know if that's right, but and so it also makes it a little more, as you can see right here, transparent. And a lot of people will build up that transparency. They might let it dry and then go back over it and sort of continue that. But what I've really enjoyed doing lately is after I create kind of this washy looking background, I will not add so much of the cold wax, and I'll go back over it with a more opaque oil color, as you can kind of see here. This one's pretty much finished, so you can kind of see that washy background, but then I like the contrast of the sort of opaque against the more transparent and washy looking background. I don't know if that's washy looking, but anyway. What I absolutely have loved about this, because I love to draw, is I love to use, let me get some tools. I'm still playing around with a lot of just found tools. I have sticks, I have this tool that is from, I think this is from when I used to do clay back in college. It was in an old shoebox or something. I think this is, I don't knit, but I think this is maybe a knitting tool that ended up at my house somehow. But anyway, I love to use the different widths of the point of the tool and scratch back in. Sometimes it's very intentional, sometimes it's not. I'm still newly doing oils enough that I love to play around with colors and mixing different colors, different shades of reds and greens, and this dark blue has kind of come into play lately, but I am just having a blast doing this. And so what I have been doing that really works well for me is to go back and forth from doing a family painting, which is a little bit more structured, and then in between I'll go back and do, if I'm feeling kind of stuck or frustrated, I'll move across the room over to my oil paints and work on the oil and cold wax. So anyway, I don't want to go on for too long, but if you ever want to come visit, just give me a call, find me on Facebook and send me a message, Sallie Knox Hall Art, and then my personal page is Sallie Knox Funderburg Hall. That's a mouthful. And you can come over and see how I work and check it all out. Anyway, thanks for coming in today, and see you soon.